Okay, my name is Paul S. Vaitses Jr., and I was born in Melrose, Massachusetts. I went to college at Dartmouth College up in Hanover, New Hampshire after I'd grown up, and lo and behold, I got in the V7 program in late 1941. By 42, I was down at Columbia University at the 90-day wonder, which they called school, which they called midshipman school. And after 3 months there, I was then transferred to the battleship Massachusetts, and I went on board the ship on December 2nd, 1942, up in Portland, Maine, Casco Bay. Yeah, the reserve program was a V7 at that time, and it allowed you to finish college, but then go immediately into one of several different midshipman schools, some at Notre Dame, some at Columbia, other colleges around the country. So that's what happened with me, and it was a great program because I was able to finish my education before I went into midshipman school. When I first came aboard the ship, I was assigned to the R Division, Repair, Maintenance, and Damage Control, and I used to stand watches in port in Damage Control Central. But in battle stations, I would be stationed in one of the repair parties, which were scattered throughout the ship in case of damage in battle. I think one of the interesting things was that very early on, in the hull department, you are, of course, the housekeepers, in addition to being the repair people. And we had to keep all the ship's systems running. But one of the things we had to do was run the trash burners. And the other thing was to make sure that all the heads were operating properly and clean. So as a little junior ensign, one of 30 ensigns on the battleship, and I was probably the most junior, I was assigned to keeping the trash burners running and keeping the heads clean and open. So I think it was kind of an anomaly that at that time I was kept derisively, I was the captain of the heads. But about 20 years later, I became captain of the ship. I think the greatest privilege any officer could have on this ship, in my opinion, was being stationed up here in the bridge. And very few people got that opportunity. The senior officers, of course, we had a captain, we had an exec. Captain was a four-striper, the exec was usually a full commander. Then you had a navigator who was a full commander. And then you had some division officers who were either commanders or lieutenant commanders, and the division officers were usually the turret officers. But in non-battle situation, many of them would be up here on the bridge running the ship while she was operating with a huge task force. In Task Force 58, which I remember very, very well, the first fast carrier, aircraft carrier type of task force out in the Pacific, keeping up with these Essex-class carriers, which were, pretty fast. And what would happen was we would be in a formation day and night, going westward in the Pacific out to Truk Lagoon or Palau or Yap or some of these places, or Ulithi, and we'd be out there to make a raid. And so we would be zigzagging day and night, and the rare privilege would be for a junior division officer like myself, who was either an ensign or a lieutenant JG, to be up here on the bridge, making sure that the engineering personnel, who would be a fireman, who was on the engine telegraph, and the helmsman, who would usually be a quartermaster, those two people, you make sure that you would be repeating orders to these people from either your officer of the deck or from the captain. I would repeat the command, turn right, come right to 090, or I would tell the engine telegraph guy, all ahead flank or all ahead full. And you want to make sure that that was being done. And you had a card which would tell you what the zigzag pattern was. And it was very scary because you realize, you've got 25 or 30 ships out there, and you're in the middle of them with aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and a big ring of destroyers all around you. And you had to be mighty, mighty careful, because if you were a few seconds late or a few seconds too soon in giving the order, you could get the whole formation into a really bad situation. And that happened. One of the things, the battleships usually were maybe there'd be 4 of them, and there'd be 2 one following the other on this side and two on the other side, maybe with aircraft carriers in the middle, or maybe a couple of aircrafts here and some of the others on the other side. But they're pretty close together within the screen of destroyers. One night, the Indiana and the Washington were lined up together, and the Washington unfortunately kept creeping up on the Indiana and creeping up on the Indiana, and eventually, by making a slow turn, they ran right up on the port quarter of the Indiana, sliced the aircraft off. We had these pontoon planes, you know, and they had catapults. Sliced the whole catapult right off, killed about 40 people who were sleeping out up on deck. They set off some 40 millimeter ammunition, which was exploding all over the place. And when we heard about it and our lookout saw it, they thought there was an air attack of some kind because these 40 millimeter shells were going off all over the place. Unfortunately, the bow deck of the Washington opened up like a can opener, and the deck slid right along and cut that catapult off and killed the people because it was so hot. A lot of people allowed to sleep out on deck when you weren't actually in battle, and killed a lot of people sleeping there and set off this ammunition. But at the same time, of course, the bow of the Washington got crumpled, and the officers' quarters were in the bow of the Washington, and many officers were killed, and the ship was flooded up there. But it took a lot of control to get both ships under control again, and they both had to go back to the States for repairs. Very serious accident, and shows the danger in operating ships. These ships, you know, you can't turn them in a minute, and very dangerous, following each other, what they call station keeping. And you had a statometer, and you're supposed to, the officer of the deck or the captain or navigator would be watching to make sure you weren't getting closer than maybe 100 yards behind. But somehow, when they made that turn, and somebody made it too slowly, and they hit each other. No, I think the responsibility, Chris, is the important thing, and I'll never forget it. And I'm grateful I had that opportunity. You got 2,300 people on this ship. You know, probably 300 or 350 maybe were on watch in the dead of night, unless you were in battle. And everybody else is asleep. And you had the responsibility to make sure that this ship was being operated safely for the ship itself and for the personnel on board. Big responsibility.